Record low oil prices threaten world economic recovery. But I thought low oil prices were supposed to boost the economy. Chinese online retailers set to conquer Russian market. But what's the secret behind the success of Chinese e-commerce? Is the sharing economy really as innocent as it looks? Who are the real winners in the sharing economy?
What's the real story behind the headlines? Time to get in the loop. So oil, it's basically become impossible to say what's going to happen to oil next. One day you'll read that oil's up 10%, $3 or $4, and the next it's slumped again. So on the one hand, you have this huge supply with American shale producers flooding the market with cheap oil. Then you have slowing demand in China, and Iran's also coming back onto the market. Now, there is talk about these producers finding a way of trying to stabilise the situation. But it's their fault we're in this situation. OPEC's been so aggressively defending its market share that, I just don't think they'll be able to agree with each other and find a way of stabilising it. But luckily, I know someone who might be able to answer this question. Hello, Ben. Sorry I'm late. The traffic in Moscow was a nightmare.
No problem.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to me. I was hoping to pick your brains about the oil situation at the moment. Ben, do you think that the oil-producing countries in OPEC will be able to agree on a production freeze?
No, I think it's impossible, because there's this whole game that's being played at the moment, led by the Saudis, where they're trying to take out the high-cost producers, particularly
American producers.
Well, American shale producers. I
Yeah.
mean, the cost of producing shale oil is 5 times as much as producing, regular crude. And the idea is that the Saudis want to take back their market share, drop the price to a point where those American businesses go out of business because they're not economically viable, and keep their share. But to do that, to make it work, you have to hold prices lower for longer. And they're reckoning a couple of years. It seems to be starting to work already.
So before I ask my next question, Ben, I'd just like you to watch this clip just on your projector, if you don't mind. I brought with me, yes. I'm going to hijack your projector.
I don't think we are yet at a fair price. We need to have a fairer price so that we can have the ability to invest more in order to secure the energy supply to the world and avoid any price shock. There's no fixed figure. But I would say that a minimum of $65 is badly needed at the moment, so that we can let the machine work and reinvest into the oil industry.
So would you agree that $65 a barrel is the fair price for both exporters and importers, or not?
It's fair for him. Each country has their own number that they would like to see. And take Russia, for example. Before the crisis began, the break-even oil price, the price oil had to be in order for the budget to balance, was $115. Post-crisis, obviously the government's been cutting, and that number's gone down to 70. So Russia would like to see a price of 70, because then they would have no deficit. But in the Middle East, a lot of the countries, they need break-even prices of $80, $90, $100 in order to pay for everything.
So do you think that $60, $70, $80 a barrel is achievable?
Yes, but I do, because it's one of these weird feedback loops things, is that if you have cheap oil, then for all of the non-oil producers, this is a blessing, because it then becomes cheaper to run your economy. That produces an economic boom. That boom obviously consumes more oil, so ironically the low prices will self-correct and send prices back up again by encouraging more economic activity. But we have a situation where we have a cartel, where we have major producers cooperating.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I must say that they're not cooperating at all. And so, on that basis, the cartel's broken down. Everybody's free to produce as much as they want. For the first time, you could say we're actually in a sort of open and free market where supply and demand will dictate the price. And at the moment, it's dictating a price of around $50. So perhaps that's the fair price.
You mentioned before that OPEC has fallen apart. There are some that think that America is a new swing producer, and you mentioned that they, at a peak, can produce, is it 6 billion barrels of oil? Is that shale oil? Yeah.
Million shale oil, yeah.
Shale oil, barrels of shale oil. But the former CEO of Dutch Royal Shell, he seems to think that's a bit less, and that America isn't, in fact, the swing producer. Would you mind just watching this,
Sure.
please?
I think, especially with the agility of the Americans, they will try, with the help of technology and productivity improvements, they will try to produce the shale oil. Those shale producers for oil who can produce cheaply, they either have continued or they will restart. But that may be a swing in total, say, of 500,000 barrels per day on the total production of 94. Yes, it is relevant for the United States, but it is still within the large swings of demand or potential other producing outages, as I just described.
Yeah, but I mean, America's actually, again, to make it even more complicated, this is a sort of political aspect of oil. And obviously for national security reasons, they want to be self-sufficient. And the shale oil has allowed them to do that largely, where they don't have to import as much, which frees them from dependence on other countries.
Yeah.
And that also gives them a political weapon because in terms of their fight with Russia, I think America's quite happy to see the price undermined because it weakens Russia, which has been the insurgent country in Europe, and is, from their perspective, causing lots of problems.
Mm-hmm. And the final question, do you believe we'll see $100 per barrel oil again, or are those times gone?
I think these things go in cycles, and at the moment everything is aligned to keep the oil prices relatively low. However, one of the biggest driving factors in the price of oil at the moment is this extraordinary situation we've had where until 1991 we had 3 billion capitalists and 3 billion communists, and the capitalists were consuming and driving cars and the communists weren't. And then suddenly, in 1991, the war came down, and now we have 7 billion capitalists, of which half of them are in the process of catching up. And they want the cars, and they want to go on holiday, and they want the SUVs. So that's a perfect recipe for sending prices up sooner or later.
Well, I think Russia will be glad when that time comes. Ben, thank you very much. It was very interesting. I'll leave you to get on with your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Right, so that was pretty interesting. It turns out that basically OPEC has lost its power, America is the new swing producer, and there's a very slim chance of these oil-producing nations reaching any sort of agreement. So if what Ben says is true and the sweet spot for oil is $60 per barrel, then the question still remains, when is oil going to go back up? So let's see what the internet has to say.
First half of the year will be quite choppy and very volatile, but the commodity cycle is not over. We will, because the lack of investment that's now occurring on a large scale out in the future, it will moderate back up. Then, I think in the second half of the year, maybe the third quarter, the fourth quarter, on a daily basis, the world should get back into a daily supply and demand balance. At that point, stocks won't be building, and then the fundamentals of the market will take back over.
Right, so here we have Bob Dudley, the CEO of BP. And if you listen carefully, he's basically said nothing. So if he doesn't know about the oil price and when it's going to go up, then I don't think anyone does. But the funny thing is the oil companies, they're losing staff, they're reducing the number of rigs in a desperate attempt just to stay afloat. But they're actually increasing investments in renewables, of all things. So I'm going to give Steen Jacobsen from Saxo Bank a quick call, and hopefully he'll be able to shed some light on the issue. Hello, Steen, can you hear me? Thanks very much for finding the time to speak to me. My first question is, why on earth are oil companies investing in renewable energy?
There is historically an inverse correlation between the price of oil and the investment that goes into green energy. But I think a lot of countries now have an agenda where people are not only pushed towards, incentivized towards doing green energy, but there's actually an actual regulation in place where companies have to comply with it. So there is a political, practical move towards green energy needs to be a higher fraction of the total oil price.
And what about Russia? This is a country that depends so heavily on oil and gas. Do you think green technologies can cure Russia's oil addiction?
That circles full back to Russia. You need to be part of the green evolution. You have the engineering capacity, you have the science, you have the model to do this, you have the strong government that can actually push through the fiscal expansion to do this. So I think that we need both in the world. I'm not trying to be a typical economist on one hand, on the other hand, but I think clearly the green energy segment in terms of electricity generation will be ever increasing due to regulation, but also due to common sense.
Thank you very much, Steen. It was a pleasure talking to you. Bye-bye.
Right, so it looks like green technologies are actually gaining ground against fossil fuels. It looks like we're reaching that point now where the price of green energy is actually comparable with oil. People have been talking about it for decades, but maybe this time it's actually going to happen. Germany produces over 25% of its energy through renewables. China and Saudi Arabia plan to meet 50% of their power needs through renewables in the next 20 to 30 years. China was the biggest market for renewables, investing $110.5 billion, almost double that of the US. I mean, who could believe that China would become the biggest investor in green tech in the world? So I'm on my way now to see Anton Usachov, who's the head of Russia's Solar Energy Association. So I think he's probably the guy to ask about renewable energy. He's also kind of a big cheese at Hevel, which is Russia's largest solar panel producer. So let's see what he has to say.
Hevel Solar is an ambitious project set up in a bid to develop a sustainable alternative to conventional fossil energy. It was established in 2009 as a venture between state-backed high-tech investor Rosnano and oil tycoon Viktor Vekselberg. Hevel has become Russia's largest integrated solar power company. It boasts the first full-cycle production facility of thin-film solar modules in Russia, a scientific research centre, and a development unit which has designed and built 3 solar plants in the southern regions of Russia.
Anton, hello, thanks for coming out.
Hi, Peter.
Yeah, it looks like a good day for renewable energies
Moscow
today.
is also quite a nice place to do solar energy.
Yeah, especially today.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that surprised me is I read on Bloomberg that investments in renewables last year were at an all-time high. But with oil being so low, I would have thought that renewables would be the first thing that people stop investing in. Why are people still investing in renewables with oil?
Firstly, Peter, I will not agree with you that the low oil prices would have some impact on development of renewables. If we take as a sample Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, that the last auctions and bidding round in solar segments could demonstrate that solar could compete also if the price for crude oil is around $20–40 per 1 barrel.
The price of the equivalent amount of energy in solar is the same to 20 to... Really?
Yeah.
So cheap?
Yeah. And we also look and see that investments in renewables, they are not reducing now worldwide. Because if we speak about solar, that around 40–45 gigawatt of solar totally was installed in 2015.
Another question is, why are oil companies, large oil companies, investing so heavily in renewable energy? I would have thought this would be their main competitor and they'd want to, push them out of the market. Why are they investing so heavily, do you think?
We speak now about some samples or examples in foreign market abroad because big oil companies, they would like to diversify their activity because they see that the prices for renewables, mainly for solar, they are getting lower, and now we speak more and more about grid parity, and they would like to develop this industry because they understand that oil times, they will be closed down, and that explains why they would like to develop wind or solar.
Okay, so in a couple of decades you might look at BP, Total as, the leaders in renewables, not oil anymore.
Yeah, okay. And I think that soon also Russian oil companies, they would also follow this trend, and then they would decide to diversify their activity and invest also in renewables projects.
Anton, thank you very much for an interesting interview.
Thank you for a nice discussion, Peter.
Thank you. Maybe see
Thank
you again. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Let's face it, it really does not look like oil is going to come back to $60 per barrel anytime soon. It doesn't look like the countries are going to be able to agree. And then you have renewables, and these are producing energy as cheaply as fossil fuels. So maybe in 5 to 10 years' time, we won't even need oil as much as we do now. But something tells me that the large oil companies in 10, 20, 30 years' time, they'll still be around because they've invested so heavily in green technology that they won't be fighting for their share on the market. They'll be tussling for the best spots under the sun.